to tell you a little brief about the Global Chamber. We're the only chamber of commerce located in hundreds of locations, with helping members grow business across 525 metros in over 195 countries around the world. So we present Globinars as we are today on every business topic for exporters, importers, entrepreneurs, and investors. We also provide AI-supported warm introductions to our members to a database of over 40 million people. So we have a pretty large reach. This morning, we're going to address the future of business in New York City, challenges and opportunities. I believe our market is a lens for other major metros in the US and worldwide. And if the New York business world gets through this pandemic with our innovative and resilient business practices, we can serve as a model for other metros around the world. Today, we will hear from two Global Chamber experts to help us talk about commercial real estate and human resources and people outsourcing issues related to the subject of the future of business. We'll begin with some brief presentations by our two speakers. I have some questions I'm going to ask them after their presentations, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the participants. So if you want to share any questions you might have through the chat, I'll do my best to address all of them. So our first speaker is Robert Sattler, who is a principal at Cresa, New York. Cresa is the world's largest occupier-only commercial real estate firm. Rob focuses on providing strategic real estate advisory services to occupiers on both a local and national basis. Rob's transaction history is comprised across a broad range of industries, which include technology, media, financial, legal, creative, insurance, healthcare, and others. In addition to transaction advisory services, Rob has assisted clients with lease restructuring, incentive negotiation, site selection, and project management. He also leads the New York Private Equity Practice Group, advising private equity firms on the real estate of their portfolio companies. So now I'm going to let Robert, please do your presentation if you want to share your screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan, and good morning, Global Chamber. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here on a nice early Wednesday morning. As you can see, the city in my background, still pretty dark out, but I'm excited. I'm sitting at 50th and Broadway today. I'm back in the city a few days a week, and I'm excited to be. And I think each week that I come in, I see a little bit more activity in the city, and that's always encouraging. So what I thought I'd do today is kind of give you a high-level overview. Let me share my screen here. Everybody see that?
Yes, we do. Thanks.
Give you a high-level overview of the commercial real estate market, and more specifically the commercial real estate market here in New York City. Then I'll pass it back over to Susan to answer any of the questions that she has. So I think the easiest way to do this is to break the industry up into a few different categories. You have your office real estate, your industrial real estate, and your retail real estate. I'll start with office. And office is the great unknown. I think we can all agree that the office is most likely forever changed. Every day I read articles on, hey, our people are super productive at home. They have no interest in coming back to the city. Employers are saying, hey, this is going to be great. We're going to be able to reduce operating costs. We're going to be able to reduce square footprints, and our physical locations, the number of them will be able to decrease. And then I see the exact opposite, where, hey, it was great working from home at first. We were super productive, but now it's getting old. We're ready to get back into the city or into our office, wherever that may be. I think especially in some industries where collaboration is very big, you're hearing a lot of negative on, hey, it's going to be hard for revenue to increase when we need to collaborate. And it's harder to collaborate on Zoom than it is when I can just walk across the office and speak to someone or run some ideas past someone. I think New York City is definitely more challenged than some other cities because of our need for public transportation and the amount of employees that live in the suburbs and commute in via public transportation. But I think as we move through this and get past it, eventually we'll get past it. So I am optimistic. Here in New York, we are seeing a lot of panic in companies. Sublease space is pouring onto the market. Currently today, there's about 16 million square feet of sublease space on the market. That accounts for more than 25% of all space that's on the market today in New York. I think really everyone's so uncertain. I think one thing that companies found out was it's not so easy to get out of a lease. There's a reason that landlords, especially office landlords, sign 5, 7, 10-year leases. They're extremely difficult to get out of. And subleasing is kind of everybody's fast response to, okay, well, we're not using our space, we're not going to need it, let's sublease it. But I think that's kind of jumping to conclusions, because most likely eventually you'll be back in the office in some capacity. And you've probably put a good amount of infrastructure and capital into that space. If you sublease it now, you're going to probably take a hit. And in reality, there really just isn't a market. There's very few companies that are doing anything right now. So to do that is kind of premature. Moving into industrial, before we moved into the crisis, the industrial real estate market was very strong. Pretty much in every traditional industrial market in the country, I use a word, they were tight markets, meaning there was little to no availability, and asking rents were at an all-time high. Here in New York, our traditional industrial markets are really like Brooklyn and Queens, and they're extremely tight. You hear more and more news about Amazon and other e-commerce companies like Walmart's e-commerce division, Target's e-commerce division, all the 3PLs that support them, taking additional space, taking any decent space that comes to the market off of it immediately. And that's challenging for other companies that are in these markets and trying to remain active. I think what you see, I guess something to think about, is most of the landlords that are in this market are generational landlords, where either they had a company that operated out of an industrial building, manufactured their product there, worked out of there, that they've owned for generations. And as businesses changed, now looking at it, the real estate is actually most likely more valuable than some of the businesses. So again, it opens up a lot of opportunities for these landlords and these generational companies who have been there for 50 plus years. Again, going back to Amazon, Staten Island has seen significant impacts with Amazon. They actually just made an announcement that they signed another 1 million square foot distribution center. So again, just industrial strong. I think industrial will remain strong. Reshoring with everything that's gone on with COVID is definitely real. And I think it will be, more impact on industrial real estate, where obsolete buildings or older buildings will come off and newer buildings will be created, and more jobs will be created in that field. Lastly, retail. I'm sure you guys all know this, but retail was in trouble before the pandemic started. And all the pandemic has done is shown how vulnerable it is. Every day you can read a different article on, a company going Chapter 11, another name brand, fashion brand going Chapter 11, and just a lot of negative press on the retail industry. I also worry because so much of New York is mom and pops retailers, and they're not cash rich businesses, and them having little to no revenue, that they're unable to pay rent, and they're a driving force of the city's economy and getting people back to work. So I think again, it will come back. It's a matter of it coming back hopefully sooner rather than later. I think what you're seeing on a larger scale, more so of not Main Street or Fifth Avenue retail, but other retail, properties, the adaptation of retail, whether it's malls being turned into distribution centers, office buildings. Really what happened after the recession was landlords were trying to create the most amount of retail space they could in their buildings, because retail came back first 10, 12 years ago. And by calling the first, second, third floor and basement all retail, all of a sudden your building became more valuable. But I think we'll now see a shift with retail in the state that it is, where landlords are now taking back that space for amenities for their office tenants to give them more of what they need. I'm always a constant optimist, so I believe good things come out of everything. And the commercial real estate industry is just slow to adapt and slow to use technology. But it's kind of mind-boggling. I mean, up until this started, we were doing all of our tours in person. We were doing little to no virtual tours. And because of this pandemic, now all our space is available via a one-click link where you can do a virtual walkthrough of all the spaces. Landlords are doing what they can to get tenants back in buildings. There's thermal scanners. You'll see there's all kinds of programs that companies can now use to occupy their space and make sure they're using it efficiently. So I think the first thing that's going to come out of this from the good out of it is the adaptation of technology and the advance in the industry. That's kind of my short synopsis. I'll pass it back to Susan and look forward to answering her questions and any of the questions that anyone has that's on here.
Thank you, Robert. Before I ask you questions, I'm going to actually let Freddie do his presentation, and then I'm going to ask you both questions, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So our next speaker is Freddie Ashby. He's the Senior Global Business Advisor at Global Upside. Global Upside supports international businesses with end-to-end HR, accounting, payroll, compliance, and talent acquisition solutions. They're in over 100 countries with clients, including both established multinationals and high growth companies. Freddie is a seasoned professional with 15 years of experience leading sales teams and organizations. He's held multiple leadership roles with companies in their early growth stage and helping them successfully develop and execute effective growth strategies. As a senior global business advisor, at Global Upside, he's worked on multiple M&A transactions and supported key enterprise clients in their efforts to expand and operate internationally. He's passionate about strong relationships and partnering with clients to help them to manage their global business needs. So now, Freddie, if you want to unmute your speaker, we'll hear your presentation. Thank you, Susan.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. I had a few technical difficulties this morning, so Caesar's going to help with this. And Caesar, we'll just move through. We'll go to the next slide. First, Susan, thank you for having me. We love our partnership with Global Chamber, and a lot of my colleagues take part in their chapters and have been on panels and taken part. And we see a lot of value in that. We appreciate your partnership. So Susan went over a high level of what we do at Global Upside. We work in over 100, and I think we're about 170 countries at last count that we work in. And we manage growth and operations and back office professional support services, anywhere from setting up entities all over the globe to your HR, kind of comprehensive look at your HR needs, anywhere from employment contracts to some of the nuances that every country offers as far as an HR and payroll, let's say, go. We have employer of record services. We have an HCM solution that's a compliance software that manages your workforce globally for PTO and time and attendance, things like that. So that's something important. And then we have a whole division that just focuses on recruitment and staffing, which is great. So Caesar, if you just skip to, yep, that's the one Susan just went over. And I'll kind of jump in here. So what I hope to do quickly, I know we don't have a ton of time this morning, but it's really in some ways take us a little bit of a myopic view of people and have a little bit of a practical discussion on how to successfully manage our remote workforce. And I love that Robert just kind of pointed out, I'm an optimist as well. And I think a lot of this shines a light, this pandemic has shined a light on maybe some of the things we needed to do. I think HR is the same, and how we manage our people. And so I'm a big fan of kind of telling businesses and some of our clients, don't white knuckle it. even if it goes back in a few months to how it was before, and we never hear of this again, and we're all back in the office 100% of the time, some of the things you can do to build your culture, to manage your people, to build that community can pay dividends no matter where we're at in a few months, whether we're all back in the office, we remain at home, or probably most likely a hybrid, right? So we see some of these studies that show we do like to be at home. We do like the flexibility. And a lot of businesses are looking at it also as an opportunity to lower some of their operating costs. I do agree with Robert that there are positions, there are industries that are experiencing some of those hardships of needing a little more of the face-to-face collaboration. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but that's definitely the case. But as of right now, we are seeing that people like being at home. They like the flexibility. The other thing, though, is we are seeing that, keep in mind, I wanted to point out one statistic that from March to May, the percentage of US employees working from home went from 31% to 65%. And so we now account for about 100 million American workers that are now remote. So we're here as we are right now. So we'll go to the next slide. So I have 4 R's that I didn't set up very well, but the first one was really reset. We have to reset our mindsets a little bit and kind of embrace this. And like I said, a lot of what these strategies will do is pay dividends, even if we returned back everything tomorrow. So we have to rethink almost every part of our business, recruiting and onboarding. When we have remote workers, recruiting can be definitely different. In our staffing division, our recruiting division, I've seen many of their open positions go from hiring at a location to, during this pandemic, changing to, hey, we'll take resumes from anywhere. We're now opening it to remote workers. So it does give you an opportunity with, especially in New York, with the transit and public transportation, the commuting time. It can seem like states away. And even when you're just a few subway stops away, sometimes it can seem like that. So think of that from a recruiting standpoint. It opens up a whole view. I have a client in New York, New Jersey area who's a small family business. And because of the pandemic, they opened their kind of an opportunity to hire a few individuals from the Philippines to help them with some back office support. They'd mentioned they probably would have never have thought to do that before. They had most of their employees just right there in their office. So I'll move through a few of these, but onboarding, just go back real quick there, Caesar, for a second. Onboarding, I'm a big fan of kind of saying the ultimate employee experience. You want to consider now that you're remote, every step of that process, from video interviewing to assessments, maybe skill assessments or personality assessments, a self-service onboarding tool, sending them, in the onboarding process, sending them a box of swag, if you will, t-shirts, a water bottle, something that can get them excited and motivated because they won't be in the office. So something they can have on their desk at home that reminds them about your brand and for them to be proud of working for you. Meetings and communication, we talked about, Robert hit on this, but technology is going to be a big piece of that. Zoom, of course, but also making sure that your employees at home are set up to succeed. And so whether you can do that on a short-term basis or you're really driving kind of a hybrid model, even if they're coming in a few days a week, it's important to make sure they have a space at home that they can be productive and effective, and also the right tools. And so from a communication and do they have the right webcam, the right microphone, noise canceling headphones, things like that, that you may want to be a part of providing so they feel like they can be professional, successful, present themselves and your company really well. And then the couple of the last ones there, operational workflows. I see a lot of clients that are now moving towards since you can't walk across the office, a little bit more of the operational workflow and procedure in writing. It's caused them to have to put things and kind of codify things that they've done over the years, just being able to go to the next office. So it's caused them to have to think through steps and processes and procedures, which can be good. And then there's plenty of softwares that can help leverage kind of an efficient workflow model that you can look. I know Rike and Smartsheet and Monday.com. There's a whole number of them that I've had experience with, or have clients that have had good experience with those to kind of automate the workflows, especially being far away. And then the last on this slide would be just the employee incentives, recognition, benefits. It's really rethinking this whole thing of what is a benefit or an employee incentive. It's already incentive in some respects. A lot of people think to be at home, but there's a lot of fun. I've looked up a few, but I've had experience with a few, like awardco.com, Blueboard. There's a new one coming, a new software coming out called Benny that I like. And these are kind of recognition incentive softwares that you can get creative with how to incentivize and motivate some of your employees. So that recognition piece is really important, especially being remote. You can feel kind of isolated at home. So that's a fun way to do that as well. So the next one, Caesar. Reconnecting. We all thrive in connection. This is what we're missing a lot of times. And I'll kind of blow through this, but leveraging technology is the big one on this page. Making sure that you have a virtual private network, if that's possible, kind of that single system of truth, a place where your team can go to get information, so that at home they're being as productive and efficient as possible to be able to find documents and processes or templates, whatever that might be. So having them have a place to go to do that. A couple of the others, like facilitate team building. We started, even at our company at Global Upside, twice a week, once in the early morning and once in the evening, to kind of cover time zones around the globe. We started doing a web yoga class, and we send it out and we log in, and here in our own homes where we see everyone that's kind of logged in, and I've taken part a few times, believe it or not. Looking at me, I'm not that good at it, but it's been fun to know that even at home, that we're doing something together as a team. And we've had other fun, virtual happy hours, team trivias, kind of just hangouts, virtual hangouts. It's been kind of fun to catch up and collaborate. And I think one more, Caesar. And then I think one of the most important parts of kind of managing a global workforce is my last R, and that's to focus on results. We can get caught up in, that's maybe not exactly how I would do it, or they're not working 8 hours straight. And we've seen a couple studies have shown that even some of the distraction at home is good for, needing to run and get your child from school, or needing to run to the grocery store to grab something for your daughter at school or something like that. Can be good. It can be good to kind of take a quick break. What we find is that right now, the remote employees, some of the studies are showing that they are working a little longer. And they're, because of that flexibility, they're willing to put in extra hours. So just understand that. One of the points I wanted to make quickly on kind of the results, or really the reconnection, was ramp up your communication. That's a theme across the board. If you're not doing one-on-ones as managers with your employees, if you're doing an all-hands meeting as a company, as a C-level executive or a manager, do them more often. If you've been doing it once a quarter, do it once a month for now. I've found that I think we're really good at change. We're not as good at uncertainty as people. So as we're changing, we're able to adapt a little bit better. But if we can keep that certainty just through communication and communicating updates of the company, where they're at, new regulations in your market or your state or even country, that's been really helpful. Just the underlying communication for that. So I think, Susan, that's about as quickly and high level as I can go through. It's a complex and kind of multi-layered issue to manage all of your employees all over the globe. But I'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Freddie. Well, thank you both, Robert and Freddie, for your presentations. I have some questions. Some of them may dip back into some aspects of what you mentioned in your presentation, but hopefully you can add a little more color, amplify, and if you feel like you've already answered it, we can just move on, okay? So my first question is for Robert. What are some steps commercial real estate needs to take to incentivize and attract businesses back to their office? I know you mentioned a bit, about, the need for contact tracing and sanitizing and so on, but what are the most important measures that you advise your clients to put in place to keep their tenants safe?
Yeah, I think it's really, let's look at it in a couple different ways. First, we'll look at it from like the landlord side, and then we'll look at it from like the employer side. So what I really think is going to happen, because I do believe that New York commercial office real estate is definitely going to be changed. The better landlords who have invested more in their buildings will do better. The commodity office buildings that have done nothing, that are no frills, they have little to no amenities, I think they will struggle. And that's kind of what you always see when we move out of recession. The good get better, and the bad get worse. You're already seeing the big REITs, the big developers. They're trying to make their tenants feel comfortable. There's infrared scanners in the buildings. There's MERV filtration systems sitting in some of the lobbies, in addition to the work that they've done with the base building HVAC work. They're doing what they can to make the tenants feel comfortable. There's signage everywhere. There's signage in the elevators. There's hand sanitization stations everywhere. Some buildings, they're giving out masks. Some of them are using technology. Some could be using it better. But they're trying. And I think I give a lot of them an A for effort, because they're really trying to do everything that they can. I think there was some talk at first, like, there's going to be a line around the corner at Rockefeller Plaza for a landlord trying to, scan everybody that walks into the building. I think some are being progressive and using technology, really going above and beyond on the technology front. I've heard of one landlord where they're using a program that it's going to be able to read the cell phone in my pocket, know that I'm a tenant and an occupant of the building. When I walk into the building, the turnstile will open. I'll be able to walk right through. That's kind of the extreme, but I think there's going to be more movement to that. The less contact you have with anything, the better, I think, is here to stay. And they're doing, everything they can to make people feel comfortable. On the second side, on the employer front, and I say this, I always get questions from Freddie, well, you're in commercial real estate, like, you must be really worried. I say, listen, we're going to be changed, but any of the progressive companies that we work with, that we were speaking with before this, they were already talking about employee flexibility, employee retention is, and I'm sure, Freddie, you can attest to this, employee retention and recruitment is huge. And the incentives that you can give them, work flexibility has been in there. We've been talking to companies for years about why there's probably not a need for everyone to have an assigned desk in your office, especially as you get into larger companies. So I think it's more of that, thinking differently, that old family business where, hey, I'm in the office every day, I want to see everybody. I think that's going to go away. And I think, for working parents, I think it's going to end up being a really good thing, because you're going to have that flexibility. Your workspace is not going to be more just a workspace. It's going to be a collaborative area, dynamic, lots of individual breakout areas. I think, over the last 10 years, we moved to this, hey, how many people can you fit into how much space? Get as many people as you can in the space. I think we will move away from that. I don't know it's as drastic as some people think. And I think some industries will be affected differently than others. It's all kind of going to see how it plays out. Who's gonna jump in first, and who's gonna be the laggards. Did I get all I think I got all your questions in that one, right?
Yeah.
I think you did, Robert.
Sorry
That
for
was
the
great.
long-winded answer.
No, it was good. Thank you. Thank you. So Freddie, in your presentation, you mentioned a bit about how hiring practices have changed, post-COVID wave one, and geographic locations may matter a bit less. But I'm wondering, with companies pivoting towards this a bit more, and are they looking to hire just the best candidate no matter where they are? And also a second question, when they're hiring people, are there terms in that hiring agreement so that, let's say we go back to hybrid or full-time in a particular location, is that type of practice being put into play?
There can be, and I think what we're seeing overall, Susan, is that we are looking, and us working globally, we're seeing companies do this already pre-COVID. Robert's exactly right. A lot of the studies that I even mentioned today were done pre-COVID. There have been others that I had followed up on, July, August, September, that's kind of coming out from SHRM and Gartner, saying that it's still this flexibility, work from home is still doing well, but they're starting to come out with some assessments to look at what kind of employees, what kind of positions would do better remotely. And so there's a few things you can look at, kind of you can look at as far as like existing employees. People are looking at existing teams and existing performers, see if they were already how cohesive they were as a team already, see how if they were a top performer pre-COVID. And that's playing into how quickly they transition those types of teams back. Are the teams interconnected enough that they need that face-to-face? And so maybe they're the first team that comes back on a 2 or 3 day a week basis, something like that. And so to assess really individual by individual, position by position, we're seeing that. As far as the recruitment, there are some terms, but overall, that trust, building the trust of finding top talent, no matter where you're at, being really clear on your high level vision of your company and how your position fits into that, and doing a better job of training and communicating, because you aren't right there in a cubicle outside your manager's office where you can have that interaction. So it's forcing us to dig in, to be a little more thorough in the hiring process, and in the kind of whole onboarding and training process, as far as that goes.
Okay. I thank you very much, Freddie. I had this question already queued up, and then actually got it from a suggestion from one of our participants. There's a recent New York Times article talking about how, the big tech, are now investing in New York, with thousands of jobs added. And, executives at these companies talk about why New York is so special, the diversity, culture, regional transportation network when it's working, as you referenced, Robert. This is always, a problem for all of us. And they'll keep luring people back. So if these big tech companies believe, why don't we? And what sectors do you see the most growth in commercial real estate? And do you see do you have a comment about this trend towards technology companies?
Sure. First off, I believe that the city will come back. I mean, New York is New York, and there's no, it's one of the greatest cities in the world for a reason. I truly believe it'll come back. Do I believe it's going to be a tough 12 to 18 months? Sure. But, everybody's written New York off so many times before, and we always seem to make it through it and come back better and stronger. And relating to the tech, I mean, New York is a tech city now. There are so many tech companies in New York, or companies that want to be in New York who are tech focused or tech related, that we're a tech city now, and big tech. And I think in the past, whenever there's a hiccup in the New York market and big companies see opportunity, they do something what I call is they go long on space, and they recognize an opportunity, recognize that the market's down, and they take advantage of it. And in the past, that's always kind of been financial, because we were a financial city. But I think, you know, you've seen it with Facebook, you've seen it with TikTok, who had little to no presence before this even existed, taking, you know, 250,000 square feet in Times Square. So, we're a tech city. We're going to see them continue. I think the commercial real estate market usually lags the overall economy by 6 to 12 months. So I think we'll even see more of it as we move into, hey, things are getting a little bit tougher and we need to power through it. Some of these bigger companies starting to react and take space because they know in the long term, you know, it'll be a smart investment. As for, you know, companies where I see growth, I see additional growth in tech. For a while, there's been a lot of talk about life science growth in New York City, and I think that will be next, life science. You know, I think financial still remains strong here. There's always been talk about moving back office jobs out of New York just because of the cost of employment and the cost of living. But I think the majority of those jobs are here to stay. Young people, young, educated, talented people, they want to be here. You know, 22-year-old kids, their dream is, hey, I want to move to New York City. I want to be able to do everything. I think it's again, relating back to the retail, it's about, you know, the city getting back to being the city, Broadway reopening, all the great like culture, the museums reopening, all that great culture that you have that make people want to be here, that coming back will have an effect on the city. And the sooner that happens, the better. But like I said, I do definitely think it's gonna be a trudge, you know, for the next year.
Freddie, do you have anything to add on that topic? Let's see.
You know what? It kind of mirrors. I love what you said, Robert, about wanting to be in New York and be a part of that. And it speaks to our human nature to want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so I would kind of liken people wanting to be in New York and everything that's a part of that. I would say try to make your business and your culture from an HR perspective. Try to make your business that same way. What can you give employees to help them feel like they are in New York, so to speak? They're bigger. They're a part of something bigger than themselves. I'm a big sports fan, and I think it's easy to do that with sports because we say the Dodgers, you know, wanted to win the World Series, and they kind of back into that. And the fans are bought into that high level vision, and the players are, and there's kind of that goal that everyone's after. And you can kind of build your community and your culture around that. And so in the same way that people want to be in New York, they want to, it's the feeling, it's the everything that it comes with. Do your very best to kind of get employee feedback as much as you can, manager feedback as much as possible. If you're doing surveys, if you're doing additional one-on-ones, you give that opportunity for everyone to speak to what kind of updates you real time on what that looks like. I think that's how we're going to make the right adjustments at the right time, is to keep our pulse on the most important asset we have at our companies, and that is our people. If we can do that, help them feel a part of something bigger than themselves. Ultimately, they always say happy employee is a productive employee. And so whether they're at the office, whether they're at home, in some ways it's the same strategy. We're just finding new ways to keep them happy and productive.
So to that topic about, you know, engage in a way that feels like you're still in New York or you're in community, can you give an example of how a company might do the sports idea? I mean, you know, I know I saw the NBA playoffs where they had everybody, you know, virtually watching, and then the players, you know. Can you give a couple of examples what you might suggest to companies to do that?
Yeah, first, I think it starts, people want in time of, and this, I'm wading into waters. Don't judge me for using politics or anything else, but they want to see the leaders. They want to see the president generally or the commissioner of the sport or something. They want them to get up and give that resolve. They want to feel like things are in control. Remember, change is okay. The sporting, they went to the bubble and they were confined. They felt somewhat isolated, and there were things they had to adjust and do. So in that same way, there are different incentives they were giving those teams and the players. They had to rethink how to keep them motivated and incentivized. But it was always, I think, leadership, setting that example, putting things in place where people could trust. I think when that leader can get up and give a high level vision of what that playoffs are going to look like, or what this next quarter is going to look like, whatever analogy we're going to use, that's where trust emerges. Ultimately, I love the quote from, I think it's Simon Sinek, that says, when you surround yourself with people who believe what you believe, trust emerges. And so I think if we're seeing that our leadership and our managers, they care what we think, they believe what we believe, then we're willing to, like Robert said, kind of trudge through the next number of months to continue to be loyal, to be retained as a productive employee, and ultimately give results. So.
Thanks very much, Freddie. So we have a question from one of the participants I'm going to throw in here, Robert, a little bit out of order from what I said I was going to do. Do companies that had signed long leases hold any leverage given all the vacancies?
Hey, listen, again, it's a loaded question, but the answer is it depends. It really each lease is different. It matters what the language in the lease says. There's always options. There's always things to do. A lot of times it's negotiations, and there's a cost associated with it. I think we're in a really unique situation because although the commercial real estate market has been hit pretty hard, the overall economy and businesses in general are still doing pretty well. And I think that kind of has like a strange impact on it, because if businesses weren't doing as well, and most of my clients that I talk to, they tell me how business is, and I get the question like, hey, can I get out of my lease? Or can I get some abatement from my landlord? I said, well, that depends. What does your financial situation look like? And like retailers, for the most part, have gotten deferments. Landlords have worked with them because they can show numbers that say, hey guys, we're in trouble, we need help. But if your business is continuing on, you've signed a lease, you have an obligation, it's a contract. But again, it's understanding that contract, understanding what all your options are, and as and analyzing them as you move through it. With all the vacancies, again, like I said, 25% of those are subleases. So what will eventually happen is landlords will have to meet the sublease market to get deals done, and they'll have to go out and buy deals to get deals done. What most people don't realize is the commercial real estate financing game is that it's a game. So landlords do 10-year mortgages that are interest-only loans. So all they have to do is cover their interest payment. And in 10 years, they have to hope that their building is more valuable than it was 10 years ago. In markets like New York, most of the time it always is. The only time landlords get in trouble is if the maturity date is in a period like it is now, because there's a lot of uncertainty, or it's now less valuable than it was when they either bought it or refinanced it. And it's with that. We also here in New York City have a lot of generational landlords that have owned the buildings for years, that have little to no debt on them, and they can operate, at 50% occupancy and sit and wait for the market to come back. And people think I sound crazy when I say that, but they don't have to do deals. They can cover their operating costs, they can cover their expenses, they can cover the real estate taxes with the building half full. They don't need to stretch and make deals, they can wait. So what I tell, all clients, if you can afford to wait. Don't make a rash decision. If your lease is expiring, you have to do something, do something that we call kick the can down the road. You sign a short-term extension and you monitor what's going on. and then you try and time it correctly.
Well, that sort of segues to a question I had for you rather than, going back to you, Freddie. So for those commercial real estate people that you're already working with, is that different for prospects though? Do you have a horizon timeline for which you suggest they should gear towards? I mean, a lot of us don't really know what's going on in that crystal ball. We're all very confused, but do you as a commercial real estate expert think a year, 2 years? What do you recommend?
First off, I don't think the market has hit like bottom, what I would call like bottom. And, landlords will try and do everything they can to keep rents at certain levels. And what they'll do is they'll pad deals with additional free rent and additional like TI allowance for construction to the deal net effectively is much better. But from a cash flow perspective, it's got a face rent or a base rent that they want to see. And because there's just so little activity and they don't really have to even meet the sublease market yet because there's just not a lot of companies doing anything, you haven't seen that happen yet. I think, like I said before, it's going to be 12 to 18 months. If you don't need to do something, don't, keep monitoring it. Keep, doing, it's a lot of internal strategic planning. Okay, where are we today? Where do we think we're going? What are we going to need? So when we can make can make a change, we can do it smartly and not just do something, reactionary. Like be proactive about it. This is where we are. This is how many desks we have today. This is how many employees we have. This is what we can go to. And then, as we move through this 12 to 18 month period, decide like when's the right time to react.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Freddie, do you have anything to add to the idea of timeline in terms of hiring? Does that relate to anything that you do or?
Not from a timeline perspective, unless you're again in kind of that waiting period. If you have positions that you would rather have in the office and you can do without right now, make sure you have that strategic plan over the next few months and discuss that internally. But it really depends. I'm not to use the same answer as Robert. It depends on the industry and the position. But we are seeing people hire both globally on the consulting side of our business and our recruiting team. So there was a slow from March to June or so. We saw almost just a halt. Everyone wanting to see what was going to take place. Now, I think, again, if you're a type of company that wants people there close so that when things come back, they have the option of coming in or having that hybrid approach, that's really what I would say to look at. Is if you want to have that option moving forward, then you kind of know your search radius for your hiring. If not, start looking, your search radius can broaden. But I'm with Robert. I think you keep tabs on it, have an overall strategy, and then you keep checking in and see where you're at with your plan.
Yeah, I think it's very like important that you keep on top of it too. And it's not like something like, hey, we'll reassess next quarter. It's almost like a monthly thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because especially here in New York, when the market comes back, it comes back. And I kind of really believe that it might come back and just take off again.
Yeah.
So, that's something that you really want to be on top of. And looking at, more than just on a quarterly basis. It's really something that you need to be having conversations with your management team frequently.
I would say that's the importance of having a plan in place to say, don't white knuckle this and say, hey, when New York starts opening up again, then we'll hurry and come up with a reentry program into the office or what that looks like. Do that now, adjust it as you go with employee feedback, management feedback. The market, of course, will dictate a lot of that. But have those plans in place now and be tweaking those as opposed to being reactionary when the time comes.
So Freddie, I wanted to ask you something, if you wanted to add anything to what you said earlier. Do you recommend anything to your clients if they're seeing a dip in productivity during this remote working or burnout on, using Zoom, whatever, all this technology we're using? Do you have some recommendations to clients on that?
Yeah, the interesting part about that is it's not unlike if you're seeing a dip in productivity at the office. We're people, and so a lot of that is just the communication. And I would say if you have a strategy in place for their success at home, if your communication is in place, I always, as a hiring manager, as an executive, you look internally. I have someone that's dipping in productivity, I want to see what I'm doing first. Is there something we're doing as a company? Is there something I'm not providing? Training, the technology tools. What could I do better to help that person succeed? That's always the first. Then I go to, do we have a strategy in place? Are communications in touch? Where am I surprised by this dip in productivity? Did I see it coming? What could I have done to not have it the slide continue? And then those tools. And sometimes it can be being a little bit creative. Sometimes that dip can be with the burnout. We've had a lot of our clients roll out mental health days, where that burnout, they kind of a forced take some time off, take some time away, paid time off where they can regroup, reassess. Some of the benefits and incentives you can now be creative with, and massages, or an overnight stay somewhere if it's okay where they're at. Anything to refresh and kind of revitalize where they're at. We are seeing a 10% increase in, even though there's more satisfaction from working at home, and in some ways more productivity. Studies are showing right now that there's a 10% increase in both stress and anxiety in people that would say they're feeling that at least once a day. And so really looking for ways, try and search for the source. I think that's the same in parenting. It's the same in managing people. Now, if you're seeing that dip in productivity, let's look at ourselves first, and then see where our strategy and our tools and our communication is. And then let's dig in a little bit and see kind of the human side of what we can do to help that person turn it around. And listen, there's still going to be low performers. This doesn't change the dynamic of your high performers and low performers. And there's had to be people let go remotely. We've had to help clients through that as well, that there's some complexities that come along with that. I won't go into that at all, but that may be the end result of that engagement. But I think for the most part, we're finding that it's pretty heavy on the C-level and the managers to stay in touch with those people and do whatever we can to kind of turn that around if we're seeing a dip in productivity.
Yeah, I can jump in there. I think mental health is so important, and it has become kind of like such a forefront, even at the corporate level. Mental health and wellness. And I think, going back to one of your first questions, Susan, like what are landlords going to do to incentivize people to come back? And we started seeing it before it. It's creating that wellness and that health in your building with all those amenities. So you have either like on-site catering, high-end on-site catering with healthy options. You have gyms, you have yoga, in-building yoga, delivery of food and healthy products right to your office. I think everyone realizes how important that is and how that enables productivity. And I think that will transform into like the physical plant eventually once we get back to it.
So one thing I wanted to say, because we really only have 5 minutes left, everyone on the call, I apologize, we didn't set this up as a meeting room so we could do more networking. We're going to do that next time. But if you want to share your contact information with each other, please do so the next 5 minutes. I don't know if Cesar can let us stay on a little bit longer, but please do so we can stay in communication with each other. And if there's anyone, connecting with Robert or Freddie, or anyone on the call that you saw that was participating that you don't already know and need their contact info, please email me or email info@globalchamber.org. One last question, Robert, and I don't know if you have more to add. I know you mentioned tech, life science, and finance as the sectors you see sort of going to maintain in New York, tech being first now over finance, I guess. What do you see is going to happen with the restaurants or retail? I read a recent Forbes article where they did surveys with like the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and they talk a lot about industrial, but they say that retail and restaurants are still struggling. How do you see that in your business in terms of trends with those companies?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't do that much work with restaurants. We do a lot of retail work, but it's usually like our healthcare companies that have retail presence. I can just talk, about experience with retail and what I'm seeing in the city. You really need the mom and pops to come back. I will say, the ones that are open that I've spoken with, most landlords have been super accommodating to them, where they've transitioned them to a percentage of sale rent and said, okay, for the time being, you'll just pay me, 10% of sales until we can get back to some kind of, more frequency. So I know from some of the ones that I've spoken to the owners at, just from going in, they've said, hey, we've been able to work this arrangement out with our landlord, and we're basically break even. We wanted to bring our guys back, or and things like that. It's really important that the mom and pop retailers get open up. And I think, again, not to get into politics, but the city and the state have done a really bad job of, forcing people out of the city and state, not realizing how much revenue is generated tax dollars just from mom and pop restaurants. And I think they need to get them back, because you can only digitize so much and do takeout so much. And as we move into winter and not being able to do outdoor seating, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think we have to get creative. We have to adapt. This virus isn't going away anytime soon. So, we have to figure out ways for these small mom and pop retailers to survive. And if people are willing to, take the risk and go in and spend the 10% surcharge that they're putting on now, I think that the city and state should allow that.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to thank everybody who is on this call. We have 2 minutes left. I don't know if anyone, has any other questions they want to throw real quick to Robert and Freddie. And if Robert and Freddie, do you guys have any things you want to say to each other?
You're awesome, Robert.
It was it's great. It was great to be on here today. It's great to hear other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Again, like Freddie said, and like I said, I'm a constant optimist. I'm sure a lot of us that are on here today are. We're going to be okay. Like, let's be the leaders. Let's go out, set the example, and people will follow.
And I think my last piece would be keep listening. Listen to the market, make a plan, listen to your people. When they come back, if that's what you're deciding to do, you're really trying to make them feel comfortable in both spaces. So do whatever you can to make home a productive place with that added flexibility, and then make a plan as they come back. It sounds like landlords are going to do their part. A lot of landlords will do their part to that, but the company needs to as well. Do everything you can to make them feel safe and where they can come back and be as productive as possible. So I would say get your strategy in place, short and long term, adjust it daily if needed, over communicate, top down and bottom up, and then leverage those technologies. In if it's in your building, if it's like I said, the central location to get information, the Zoom and other technologies like that to stay connected. And I think it's going to come back. We're resilient, and I think we'll come back as a country and as New York City for sure. I agree with Robert.
Thank you so much, Freddie and Robert. And just one last thing, anyone who is not a member of Global Chamber, I'm not sure if there are any participants on the call that are not. If you want to get more information, you can either email me, Susan@globalchamber.org, or info@globalchamber.org. And I did want to encourage you to follow that. We have a lot of events, including we do have a meetup coming up for the Global Chamber New York City on November 12th at noon, where we're going to do something unusual, where we're going to do a meetup with the Tel Aviv Israel chapter jointly with the Baltimore Washington chapter. So that's coming up. And that's going to be more like, a breakout room meetup kind of thing, so we can have more networking amongst each other. But again, thank you very much, Robert and Freddie, and let's keep it going. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.